That's a hit. That. Hit. Hit. Shooter ready. Mark, set, go. So it's gonna be shooting a little bit well, I guess. Nutnfancy coming at you with another foundational video on AR-15 varieties, specifically choices in gas system. Which one is best? I'm going to try to cover the pros and cons as I currently see them, maybe to help guide your buying. And honestly, this is not a video I'm looking forward to posting. That's because I do not want it to turn into a forum experience. I pretty much long ago abandoned the forums because of all the nonsense and rhetoric and conflict and elitism that I see there. So please, let's not have that in the comments below this video. If you are a strong proponent of one system over the other, rock on. Feel the way you want to feel, that's fine, but let's not lambast other guys that choose otherwise. We are all on the same team. We always will be. Treat each other accordingly with respect. Please avoid the myopia on type or brand, and no AEs as always. I sure appreciate that. That's why I'm not looking forward to it. There's another reason too, to be honest. I don't know if I'm the end-all expert on both types. In fact, I know I'm not. There's guys that have a lot more trigger time than I do on these guns that have maybe a lot more foundational basis for their opinions. That's not to say I have not fired thousands of rounds, at least through DI guns. And I'm getting to that point with piston guns. But I'm in a learning phase with piston guns. And it's going to take several years before I have the same body of knowledge with those as I do with a DI gun. However, I think there are some important considerations and some data points that I might be able to share with you that will help you in your buying decision. I was initially going to bring out these points in a review video, specifically for this outstanding piston gun in the background, the Ruger SR556. This one's dressed out a little bit, but it is a Ruger 556. I can't do it though. It takes up too much airtime, and I want to break it out separately so guys can refer to it as well. By way of introduction, what are our players here in the background? And I'm going to roll in a couple guns as I talk about these specific points, which are salient, word of the day, to the type. Ruger 556 wearing a CTR stock, MOE grip, mag pull, magazine, ergo front grip, ergo rails, P3D Phoenix, and a KZ drop down. I always prefer the simple light setups that are light. I'm going to talk about the importance of keeping your rail uncluttered with a bunch of nonsense. And then this one was wearing a 5C2 Phantom flash suppressor. My favorite flash suppressor. You know that. I have a separate video on it. Great gun. And also the optic, a very affordable V7 2x7 power Weaver in a B-square AR-15 rail. No, I don't always like the top stuff. And I'm kind of evaluating both of those items on an AR-15. You may see separate vids or input about those as the test progresses. In the foreground, this is a Rock River Entry Tactical, specifically an LAR-15 model, wearing a full profile thickness barrel under that handguard. It's not an M4 profile barrel, which I really love about the Entry Tactical on the Rock River. 7-inch light rail by Daniel Defense. M6X by ITI, that's a laser light combo, xenon variety, non-LED. PRI folding front sight, folding rear sight, some of my favorite BUIS. A Leopold, 1.5 by 5 illuminated 30 mil tube, and SPR LaRue mount, CTR back end, a Myad grip, and I think it's wearing just a regular Rock River match trigger in this one. Also a Phantom flash suppressor on that bad boy. So these are our two representatives of the type. I think they're accurate. Surely I could roll in a bunch more. For piston guns, I mean, gosh, where do we start? We have so many to choose from. Every month it seems like more are coming out. We're going to use a 5.56 for the discussion. Easily we could roll in front of us an LMT Defender, XCR, Bushmaster GPR, POF 415 or P11 SX. These are all just snapshots in time. Stag Arms 8L, LMT SRT, and the list goes on. And then you have all the conversion kits too. Bushmaster has a gas piston retrofit for about 400. CMMG has one for around 300. I'm hearing good things about the CMMG one. Anyways, lots of piston guns, lots of DI guns. Again, they're Rock River's kind of a middle of the road type. We could roll in a Colt or whatever. On to the specifics of the video. I'm going to start the discussion off with a direct gas impingement AR-15. Again, the Rock River. And noobs, if you don't know what we're talking about, i.e. DI versus piston gun, I'll try to summarize it as best I can real briefly. I don't want to spend too much airtime on it though. What we are talking about is how do we move this bolt carrier, or actually the bolt, rearward after the firing is complete. In a direct gas gun, we do it by tapping off a portion of the gas, or the exhaust, if you will, from a bullet that's fired down the barrel. The tap-off hole from the barrel, and that's what it is, it's a little hole, allows extraction of that gas and funneling of it through a gas tube, which is under the handguard here in this Rock River. You can see a little silver tube there. See how it angles there? I don't have my flash. I'm holding two hands. I can't show it to you anyhow. That's the gas tube. See how it goes back to the receiver? That gas tube enters the receiver of the AR-15 and enters the bolt carrier key of the bolt carrier. And this is what effects extraction of the spent round, moving the bolt rearward and the bolt carrier at the same time. That's a direct gas gun. The piston gun, we'll talk about here in a little bit, is a little bit different in how it operates. So that's just, in very briefly, how a DI gun operates. But there's a lot of people, gun writers, internet people, forum guys, that have told us that we're basically living a lie being attached to a DI gun. That the military ever adopting a direct gas impingement gun was a bad thing. We should have always ran a piston gun, kind of like the FAL, Galil, AK-47, and that a DI gun is broken. It has been broken from the start, and on they'll say that. What do I say? And again, this is my experience from where I stand. I think a DI gun is fine. I think if you keep it lubricated, you keep it maintained properly, for most POUs, and again, POUs means philosophies of use, a DI gun for the average law enforcement officer or civilian sheepdog will provide outstanding service. It will. Now, if you say, well, I can't trust, a Rock River, it's not 100% mil spec, I disagree with that. I think a lot of quality makers, to include Rock River, Bushmaster, Smith & Wesson, make a fine AR-15 that is extremely durable. If you don't trust the bolt carrier group or other critical components, then swap it out. Here's a Daniel Defense M16 bolt carrier group. There's a lot of others. BCM makes one that is outstanding. Shot peen, magnetic particle tested, whatever you want. Properly state gas key, and you can sub that in. Me, I shoot these to failure. I'll shoot them to failure and then I'll swap them out. The problem is, even after thousands and thousands of rounds, the guns that I've shot, the Rock Rivers and Bushies and a couple other varieties, they keep on trucking. A DI gun is efficient if, again, you keep it properly lubricated and cleaned. By the way, to lubricate the AR-15, what I'm talking about is you lubricate that bolt right there. That's the bolt and its locking lugs. Inside the carrier group, I'm going to drop some CLP. If you want to get more exotic with your lubrication, you can, but this whole mechanism inside here should be lubricated, well lubricated, to include the bolt carrier as well. This is not a good representation of it now because it's new. It hasn't been used. It's just in stock. So it hasn't been subbed in, and I don't want to get my hands all greasy. So a DI gun, I think, will run great. A criticism of the DI gun versus a piston is that it is much dirtier inside the bolt carrier group. In other words, as we funnel that gas down the gas tube, it enters the carrier key here, it fouls this entire area with all kinds of powder and discharge. That's a true statement. It is a fair criticism. I can vouch. It does happen. Also, another criticism is, as it comes in, it really heats up these critical components, to include the cam pin, locking lugs, maybe the carrier key and the screws which attach it, and making them more subject to failure. And I think under certain circumstances, I agree with this. For regular semi-automatic fire, even high rates of semi-automatic fire, again, I really don't think it's an issue. I haven't seen it to be. For sustained full auto fire, I think it can be an issue. For SBRs, i.e. short-barreled weapons, where we are cutting the barrel shorter than what you see here is a 16-inch barrel length, maybe going with a 10, even a 7, and really changing the nature of that direct gas system and pretty much over-gassing the bolt carrier group. And over-gassing means that it's traveling much faster, and then we have to dink around with our buffer weights, in other words, to slow that bolt down and change the timing of the actuation of the bolt carrier. In that situation, I think a piston gun is better. I.e. full auto fire or ones where we're going to be running short barrel lengths. It could be a big advantage. However, and I'll just discuss this now while I'm here, I don't think cleaning the innards of a AR-15, at least a semi-automatic variety, direct gas gun, is that huge of a deal. I'm not going to take this apart because it just makes this video even longer. But taking this bolt carrier apart is simple. All I do is extract that key or the pin there. Everything comes apart. I scrub it. Yes, on the bolt, you're going to have, lots of deposits of carbon. But guess what? On a piston gun, you have the same thing, and no one discusses this. In testing the 5.56, putting 700 rounds through one of the guns, there is a lot of dirt and muck that comes up to the forward handguard, and it requires a lot of cleaning. This isn't the one. We have another 5.56 here. Where did it go? There it is. Hang on a second. This isn't the one that had the high round count. This one is. This bad boy here had a lot of rounds thrown downrange with it. You get a lot of accumulation of carbon up here, fouling. It all moves to the front of the gun with a piston gun. Also, this piston, this is a gas regulator, and the regulator detent on the 5.56, inside is a piston. It gets just as dirty as the bolt in an AR-15, by the way. So it needs to be maintained and cleaned, and even though the SR 5.56 and many of its competitors and contemporaries also have chrome-plated components, which makes cleaning easier, it's still a chore. And the dirt has just moved from to up here from the bolt group. Now, proponents of the piston gun will say, well, that's a good thing because we've taken the heat and the dirt out of here. The critical components, again, the locking lugs, cam pin, all those things, any of which fail, will shut the gun down, and we've moved it up here. Agreed. I think you have, and that's a positive thing. But again, everyone talks about how cool running and clean running the piston gun is, and I'm here to tell you, it just depends on what part of the gun you're talking about. If you're talking about the front part of the gun, it's not clean at all. It's coming out of the discharge hole in the 5.56. It's right here. Spring cup and LWC, or LMT, I'm sorry, or LWRC. There's so many acronyms, can't even keep them straight. And that will flush the whole front end with carbon and fouling. Plus your piston's going to have to get cleaned. Now, guys will say, well, you can shoot thousands and thousands of rounds with a piston gun and not lose any durability. It's just going to run 100%. Again, I'm still kind of in a learning phase. I haven't shot thousands and thousands of rounds yet in a piston gun. I'll get there sometime. The best way to do it, if you could afford it, is take some tactical carbine classes. That's a great way. And there's some great evaluations on piston guns out there. There's some great articles on them talking about what they have found so far. But I think as users of tactical carbines, we're still in a learning phase. And I still think piston guns are establishing their own track record. The DI guns have an established track record, and we know well what the shortcomings of the guns are. The piston guns, I still think we're learning, and it's also because there's really no standardized piston gun out there. Every manufacturer has kind of its own design and variation on the theme. And noobs, what are we talking about here? I forgot to mention how a piston gun varies from a DI gun. Remember, we're talking about how to operate the bolt. One of these doesn't have a bolt in it because I took it out, but let's pretend it does. instead of tapping the gas off from the barrel, there's so many guns and I only got 2 hands. Sorry if this is kind of jacked up. We don't tap gas off the barrel and drive it all the way back to the bolt in a piston gun. Instead, we keep it up here. In the SR556, what it does is it taps off gas through the hole in the barrel again as the bullet passes by. That gas enters the regulator, okay, through varying sizes of orifices, which we can control with this knob here. So it can be a big, small, bigger still, or none at all. And then what it does is it impinges upon a chrome-plated piston, which is in this gas block here. That piston is driven by that gas force and strikes, in this design, a transfer rod. The transfer rod is what moves the bolt. And I told you I had the bolt out, and here it is. This is from this very gun. And this is the bolt out of a piston gun. Again, I think it's representative. It doesn't have a gas key on it. Instead, it has a striking plate, striking face on the top of the bolt carrier. See that? And then that transfer rod smacks that and provides that rearward motion to extract the spent shell. And then it will go in rearward, and then the buffer spring and the buffer work in unison to push it back forward, completing the firing cycle as a new round is stripped off. That's a piston gun. The advantage of it is we don't put hot propellant gases back into the receiver of the gun. It remains cooler. So when guys say a piston gun remains cool, what they're talking about is this portion here. It is totally incorrect to say that the gun remains cool overall. In fact, up front, it gets very hot, hotter than a DI gun in my experience. This is a heat sink. I don't know exactly why. I know you're tapping off gas, but it might be the movement of the piston and you have some frictional qualities going on here. But the gas block on a piston gun gets very, very hot. Doodle, my son, burnt his arm on it during the testing phase of this very gun here. And I'm talking like it melted right through the skin after a string of about, not that many, about 45 rounds is all. So the heat, the dirt goes somewhere on a piston gun. And where does it go? Right here, right to the front of your handguard. And you can see the fouling deposited on this Troy Industries SR556 handguard. So where does it run cool? Back here, but not up there. Okay. Now another consideration, that's dirt foul. We kind of addressed the dirt fouling and heat issue. And I probably forgot something. I might have to annotate it. Another issue is the weight. You guys know I'm big on that. Nutnfancy, I'm always talking about the weight, your tactical loadout, talking about how guys think they can carry like, you know, hundreds of pounds of gear. Well, maybe not hundreds, but a lot of gear and not suffer any ill from it. That's just artificiality. I don't know if it's because of the video games out there or what that promotes that ridiculousness, but there it is. A piston gun is heavier. That's because there's more metal up front right here. You have the regulator, a larger gas block, you have a piston in this design, a transfer rod spring which wraps around it. Why is that necessary? Because as that transfer rod is pushed backwards, sorry that Phoenix light's in the way, I probably should have taken off for the review. But as the transfer rod is pushed backward, that spring resets it to its initial position. Okay, so that is more metal than a direct gas gun has. A direct gas gun just has that hollow stainless steel gas tube. Okay, there's no other pistons up front, and this is advantageous in my estimation because it gets down to swing weight. How fast can you get the gun into action? Swing weight. The more crap we hang off our gun, I told you I was going to get to this, the slower our gun is going to get into action. I would watch that very, very carefully. I am very particular what accessories I will put on my AR-15s, and unless they serve a very particular purpose and increase my capabilities, I do not put them on. I don't care if people like what I put on. I'm not trying to put it on to impress the forums. That is just, sorry, it's just stupidity. Look very carefully. I think the M6X on this particular AR-15 is a smart accessory. It's light, it's compact, and the user didn't even put any external wires. He's just going to operate it with his thumb. Simple is better. Very lightweight and compact VG, vertical grip. The Ergo, no big extraneous or large vertical grips, and one of the lightest and best designed rails out there, the Daniel Defense Light, 7-inch variety. and determine, hey, you don't need a ton of rail space just for the thing shown. Very smartly set up, and it's very fast in action. As this gun weighs, and I think it's about 8.5 pounds with everything on it that you see, that's the benefit of a DI gun. Lightweight, we have less metal up front, and that's with a full thickness barrel once again on this Rock River. And yet it's fast into action, and it's just a dream to fire. Piston guns are heavier. On the order of about 16 ounces heavier will be, let me show you this SR right here, will be the average piston gun. Again, I'm still learning and I'm still evaluating, so I'm just telling you what I know now. My opinions may change in the future with advancements in technology. I can't foresee the future, but I'm just telling you what I know now. The SR556 weighs with actually the backup iron sights, those Troy sights, the 10-inch rail, as it comes from the factory, about 8 pounds, 7.95 or so pounds. That is about 16 ounces heavier than a direct gas counterpart. The weight is probably, in my opinion, and that's all it is, not worth much, is in the worst possible place, and that's up front. Because remember, we're talking swing weight, getting it into action. The good side to that, and some guys have pointed this out as well, yeah, it's a little bit slower to swing into action, but it's more stable on target. That goes true for any heavier gun. Once you can carry it there and get it into action, yes, it's going to shoot better. It's going to recoil less, especially since the weight's up front. Theoretically, the piston gun is going to stay on target a lot easier than a DI gun. Personally, I don't see a huge difference between the two. I do notice a big difference in swing weight. And before I forget, let me tell you something else I found. Initially, I thought placing the vertical grip on here, like you see, again, the ergo on this SR556 in its current position was cool. That's a great place for it. I have changed. I actually think grasping near the mag well when you present the gun into action is going to be a quicker way to do it, because what we are doing is minimizing our fulcrum for the weight. If we extend our arms out here or even further out here without a VG, isn't that increasing our fulcrum and effectively increasing the amount of weight we have to get into action versus right here? Yes, I know this is not as stable a hold, but I think maybe to get it into action, if you want to transition forward, that would be, cool. That's where I'm thinking now, is that the piston gun to get it quicker near the mag well. Okay, we talked about the importance of not hanging too much crap off your gun on a DI AR-15, even more so on the heavier up front piston gun. Really watch and scrub very thoroughly the types and amount of accessories you're going to run on your piston gun. I always think a light is pretty much mandatory. On my own guns and on the guns that I loan from my associates for review, some of which are around this table, I'll run the Phoenix P3D. PD30 is a successor. Great light. No, it's not a dedicated weapon light. Extremely bright. I've talked about that a lot. No need to cover it again. But it's light, compact, does not destroy the swing weight. Neither does the lightweight vertical grip that I've chosen here as well. And there's a lot of VGs you can throw on there that will destroy it. The choice is yours, but be very careful. The piston gun is heavier. And to me, that's probably its biggest disadvantage when it goes head-to-head with the DI gun. The DI gun, again, about a pound lighter. In most POUs, I think that is a critical pound. I've got so many guns here, switching them all out takes me a minute. But this is a comparably equipped direct gas gun, wouldn't you say, this Rock River versus a 5.56 in the background? Yes, this one wears a 30 mil tube optic that is illuminated, by the way. The one in the background, a variable 2x7, but more or less very similar. Differences, of course, is this rail here is only 7 inches versus the 10 up there. I am a fan of the shorter rail in this POU. If I go with an SPR or Precision AR-15, then I want a longer rail so I have more real estate to situate a bipod. But in this POU, I call this CPG or checkpoint gun. I may tell you why later, don't ask. But this is a good checkpoint gun, versatile all the way out to about 300 meters probably with this current configuration. I do like a rail for the VG and the light, and I like free floating the barrel too. But I digress. The DI gun is lighter, and that makes it easier to carry around, easier to port. Piston guns are going to be heavier. That is changing. I see some designs out there that are coming around the 7.2 pound mark, and you may see that change dramatically as time goes on. But that is the advantage of a DI gun more than anything, is the weight. Another advantage though of a piston gun is, I think, it's better for suppression. And I'm not talking suppression fire, I'm talking about putting a silencer or suppressor on the end of it. If you do that on a direct gas gun, expect to get blowback through the bolt carrier group into your face. You can mitigate this somewhat by application of a PRI gas buster charging handle. I don't think this one has it, but what that does, it has a vent channel that hopefully redirects that debris away from your face at a perpendicular angle. It works to a degree, but a direct gas gun, when you throw a suppressor on it, in my opinion, and again, I don't have tons of experience, but I don't think it's ideally suited for it. Piston gun would be much better. Also, anytime you change the barrel length of a DI gun or you throw a suppressor on it, you can change the way the whole balance works in the direct gas system. Whereas a piston gun is going to run the same no matter if you put suppressor on it, you run a 7-inch barrel, you run a 10-inch barrel, it doesn't matter. The regulator, the piston, it does the work of reciprocating the bolt, and it's just going to stay consistent. That is a big advantage of a piston gun, I think. The first one I already talked about. Actually, there's several. Cleaner bolt carrier group, we talked about that. In its most critical points, we're moving the dirt, the heat up front. And another one is full auto fire. I do think if I have to do mag dump after mag dump in a gun, if I had to choose a direct gas or a gas piston gun, I would opt for a piston gun. And I'm talking a lot of rounds, maybe some beta C mags, disengagements, really laying some lead. The argument could be made also that neither of these guns is really made for that. The reason I say that is because they do not feature quick change barrels. If you're going to be putting hundreds of rounds rapid fire through your gun, and I'm even going to say semi-automatic fire, it does not have to be full auto. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. I can fire a semi-automatic as fast, nearly as fast as a full auto gun. Nearly. That's a key word there, guys. And I can heat those guns up like a lot. But if I'm doing a lot of shooting, I would probably opt for a piston gun. And I'd be very careful to steer clear of this whole front area of the handguard, which is essentially a heat sink. Wear gloves, steer clear of this. That heat, that dirt goes somewhere and it goes right here. Yeah, your bolt carrier stays cleaner and cooler, but just something to be made aware of. I want to talk about one other thing on a piston gun. I kind of mentioned it early in the video, and I'm sorry if the thoughts are disjointed. I think I'm covering most of the things I wanted to. A piston gun still is in its infancy because, again, there's no standardized design. Each one is going to have to establish its own track record, and sometimes the littlest innocuous things can break a design. For instance, I have read about some, are they LMTs, that they had a spring in the upper portion here that overheated and broke during extended firing sessions, and they had to troubleshoot that spring, replace it, find something that can withstand the tremendous heat that's kept up here in the piston gun. Little things like that that only testing and evaluation over a long period of time can reveal. And in a lot of ways, the piston guns are new that way. The DI guns are not. They're very tried and proven. Yes, they have some drawbacks. We know what they are pretty much at this point. But the piston guns, kind of in their infancy. Another thing that I've heard about is carrier tilt. And to explain this, I want to use the bolt carrier group from a DI gun. Remember, the gas comes down here through the carrier key and exacts a centered, a centered push force to the rear. In other words, we're not pushing from the bolt carrier key, we're pushing from the center of the bolt carrier. Piston gun, not so much. The transfer rod actually is going to impact that strike face here, and so our our push force is kind of centered at the top of the bolt carrier. And what that can do is actually push down on the bolt carrier as it goes rearward into the buffer tube and create some problems right here. Maybe rubbing into the buffer tube, and I've seen some pics on that, and just kind of shaving some metal off. I haven't noted this with the SR556 incidentally, but I've heard about it with some conversion kits and other brands. And again, I'm not the end-all expert. I just hear it's more of a nuisance than anything. It's really not a reliability problem, but it's a variation. It's kind of what happens when we take a direct gas system like the AR-15 and we do some modifications on it, say, you know what, we're going to change this to a piston design. There's a lot of unknowns and unintended consequences from the design, so it takes a lot of designing to get it right. Direct gas versus piston AR-15. Which one do I personally prefer? I know I'll get asked that question. Again, I want to reiterate to you guys that I'm not the end-all expert, that I'm still in my learning phase with piston guns, as you see in the background. I've tested several of them at this point, fired several, and I'm talking the AR-15 varieties. Through the years and dating way back, I've fired a lot of other piston style of guns, you know, the M14, M1A, you know, Mini 14, AK, Galil, FAL, heck, the Keltec SU-16 even. Those are all piston guns, lots of trigger time on them, love them. But for AR-15s, if guys force me to have an answer, I guess I'll tell you. And maybe you should go to guys that run tactical carbine classes and shoot thousands and thousands of rounds through these things, because they may be, you know, better qualified to give an answer. But here's mine. I still like a DI gun. Weight is everything, dudes. You know that. I've said it in so many videos. I essentially have the same capabilities in a DI gun as I do a piston gun. Yes, I know it gets dirtier in the bolt carrier group, but I can clean that. I can lubricate it. I can take care of it. I can maintain it. And with the thousands and thousands of rounds that I have through DI guns, with the quality ones, the brands that I've talked about, I just haven't had a problem. I just haven't. Now, as a military operator, will things change? I know there's lots of rumors out there, maybe some substantiated, some not, about, you know, firefights in the Mideast, Afghanistan, Iraq, about how the M4s have totally let down the troops and jammed. Keep in mind, every story has lots of facets and what happened, and it's real easy on the internet for, you know, myths and untruths to be spread, and I don't want to be part of that. I have to go off information sources I trust, and what I trust and have heard a lot is from the troops coming back from Afghanistan, Iraq, is there's a lot of love still for the M4 carbine. That the large majority of troops love it, and it's compact, lightweight, hits hard enough, and it's reliable if it's maintained. The key is make sure you swap out the components after it's fired thousands and thousands of rounds. There is a replacement schedule that you probably should adhere to for the key components there, and lubrication. If you do that, a DI gun is going to serve you, especially if you're a law enforcement officer or a civilian sheepdog, neither of which I think will ever send downrange probably more than, I don't know, I'm going to be conservative and say 2,000 rounds, at least civilians, in their lifetime. In that POU, a DI gun will serve you quite well. You'll be pleased with it. It will not fail you. You won't even have to sub in mil-spec components. Just keep it lubricated, dudes, and it'll rock and roll for you. Yes, I know there's disadvantage to the DI gun. It's not perfect. We've talked about that. And yes, I know a piston gun has some big advantages. Again, for suppression, for full automatic or extended rapid fire, maybe the piston gun is a better option. If you can deal with that heavier swing weight, it's up there, and pound extra of weight you'll carry with most piston guns. I know it varies. It might be just 8 ounces, might be 6 ounces more. Don't know. Every design is different. But if you can live with that, then maybe a piston is the way to go. If you're a frequent shooter and put thousands and thousands of rounds down range, maybe a piston gun is the way to go too, because you don't want to clean your bolt carrier group as frequently. You know, maybe that's the way. But I still think you're going to have to clean it. That piston needs service, dude. And I can tell you it's going to be just as dirty up front here as the DI bolt carrier group after a couple thousand rounds. But again, we're moving the heat up here and not back there. So that's my take. Piston versus DI guns. Sorry if it was disorganized, but I had to throw this out there. Foundational video by Nutnfancy. Take it or leave it, but that's kind of how I feel right now at the end part of October 2009. Thanks so much for the support. There's more reviews coming. I may have to refer to this video for the information. Thanks so much, dude. Appreciate it. See ya. To the left, or counterclockwise, and we'll get some more reflection off that white plate so we can see it.
Facing more southward or northward?
More southward. Hit. Hit. Nice. High. Nice. Oh.
Put that in a dump pouch. See how you did with the bad guys. Gun's running good. The SR556. Fun gun. I do miss the swing weight on a DI gun. It's heavier. Granted, I'm running a P3D light up front. This really gets hot. These gas blocks on these piston guns, be careful.
Used to running, ain't you?
Yep.
Ruger SR556 Tactical Doodle. Running crap wolf ammo. Five more.